The QB wins debate will rage on forever as long as the NFL exists. No matter which side of it you may land on, you can't deny that great quarterback play correlates very highly with winning games. Sure, a quarterback can play awful and still win, but it doesn't happen very often unless you're Tom Brady. However, what if there was somebody who was dumb enough and had both the time and the means to research outliers throughout NFL history to create the absolute worst perfect season imaginable, where a team won every single game they played despite their quarterback being complete dog shit every single time? Well, you're in luck, because I'm dumb as shit and have a YouTube channel. In this video, I will take the worst quarterback performance by game number of the season. For example, the worst performance by a winning quarterback in history in game number 1 of a season belongs to Jake Plummer in the 2003 season opener. Then I will move on to the worst performance by a winning quarterback in history in game number 2 of a season, and so on until game number 16. Because this hypothetical team will be undefeated at 16-0, fuck 17-game seasons, they'll get a first-round bye. I'll then take the worst divisional round, conference championship game, and Super Bowl winning performances ever to round out this perfect season of shit. A few more qualifiers. With a few exceptions, I only chose quarterbacks who both started and finished the game in question. I also determined that the quote-unquote worst game was chosen by the lowest adjusted net yards per attempt number by the quarterback. Adjusted net yards per attempt is an all-encompassing stat that takes attempts, touchdowns, interceptions, yards, sacks, and sack yards lost and fits it into one neat number to give you an idea of how good or bad a quarterback was in that game. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the thrill of terrible quarterback play being rewarded throughout NFL history. Game number 1, Jake Plummer, September 7th, 2003. Jake the Snake's first game with the Bronx after 6 years in Arizona ended in success, but he did little to nothing to contribute to it. He completed under 50% of his throws, 0 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions for a putrid rating of 21.7. Fortunately for Jake, his ground game, led by healthcare program respecter Clinton Portis, finished with 184 yards and 2 scores. His defense also gave him a pick 6 off of John Kitna, which is easily the worst thing a Kitna has ever done in this 30-10 win. Game number 2, Jim Druckenmiller, September 7th, 1997. 6 years earlier to the date, 49ers starter Steve Young was out with injury. So who better to replace him than brand new first-round pick Jim Druckenmiller? Well, there's a reason Druck is known as one of the biggest draft busts ever. Despite coming away with the win in his only career NFL start, Druck barely completed 33% of his throws. He did have a touchdown pass, but also 3 interceptions for a 19.3 passer rating. Despite St. Louis only putting up 12 points and committing 4 turnovers, Druck would have lost if not for a 35-yard touchdown run by Garrison Hurst in the 4th quarter. The worst perfect season ever was almost over before it began. Game number 3, Justin Fields, September 25th, 2022. The most recent entry in this video comes from this very season. Second-year quarterback Justin Fields was in the midst of a terrible stretch of play, but on this day, against a team led by a human giraffe, his shittiness was excused. He completed under 50% of his throws, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions for a 27.7 rating. Luckily for him, as is the case with most of the entries on this list, Fields had great ground support and a clutch defense. Khalil Herbert ran for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Chicago's defense picked off Davis Mills deep in Houston territory to set up Fields with a Brady-esque 4-play, 0-yard, game-winning drive, capped off by a game-winning field goal as time expired to win 23-20. Game number 4, David Whitehurst, September 24th, 1978. Did you know that Clipboard Jesus' father once played in the NFL? Did you know the Packers have had quarterbacks before Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers? Well, in this 1978 battle, Whitehurst's stat line of 7-14 for 91 yards and 1 interception isn't quite as bad as others on this list, but this is where adjusted net yards per attempt comes in clutch. Whitehurst was sacked 10 times for 83 yards lost. But it didn't matter because Green Bay's defense forced 11 turnovers, including a blocked punt return touchdown and an interception return touchdown to win the game 24-3. You and I could have won as the Packers starter on this day. Ironically enough, this was the game that led to San Diego hiring Don Coryell, which jump-started Dan Fouts' Hall of Fame career. Game number 5, Todd Collins, October 10th, 2010. Every quarterback on this list started and finished the game, except for Collins, who was so terrible I overlooked Caleb Haney coming in to throw a few passes. It stands to reason that Collins' performance in this 23-6 win over the Panthers is the worst game by any winning quarterback ever. He went 6 of 16 for 32 yards with 4 interceptions and a 6.2 rating. He also took 2 sacks for 15 yards, giving him an adjusted net yards per attempt of -9.06. Not even our good friend the Sex Cannon, Rex Grossman, Grossman, more on him later, ever stooped to levels that low. So, how did Collins win the game? Well, Matt Forte ran for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns, and his great defense got to play against Jimmy Clausen. Enough said. Game number 6, Rex Grossman, October 16th, 2006. Most of the games on this video you probably don't remember or even knew of, but this is not one of those games. The infamous Monday Night Football game between the Cardinals and Bears, where the Bears trailed 23-3 late in the third quarter before reeling off 2 defensive fumble return touchdowns and a game-winning punt return touchdown by Devin Hester to win 24-23. Sexy Rexy committed not 1, not 2, not 3, but 6 turnovers while having a passer rating of 10.2. In fact, Grossman winning, despite being so aggressively terrible, caused the late great Arizona coach Dennis Green to famously melt down in his post-game press conference. He couldn't believe Rex won, and all these years later, I still can't believe it either. Game number 7, Dave Cragg, October 21st, 1990. Because YouTube is run by fascists, I was unable to find any game film from this game, so you're just gonna have to trust me on this. Craig is one of those quarterbacks who played a very long time and put up nice stats without ever really making a splash or winning anything, so he never gets talked about. Well, on this October day in 1990, he made a splash, but in a negative way, and through hours of vigorous research, going to ProFootballReference.com, I uncovered it. In this 19-7 win over Kansas City, Craig completed 37% of his throws for 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions with a sparkling 9.2 passer rating. Unlike most other games on this list, Craig really didn't get any monster support on the ground or any return touchdowns to help him. His defense did force 3 turnovers, but in the end, they just did a great job of not allowing Kansas City to score. Sounds just like my sex life. Game number 8, Ken Stabler, October 23rd, 1983. Hall of Fame quarterback Ken Stabler lived by a simple mantra: throw picks and fuck chicks. And never was this philosophy more on display than this October 1983 game versus the lowly Buccaneers. Snake did throw a touchdown pass, but he also threw 4 interceptions, including a pick 6 to put New Orleans in a 14-0 hole. But he worked his way out of it thanks in large part to a teammate recovering a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown and his defense recording a 70-yard pick 6 that gave New Orleans the lead for good late in the third quarter. Stabler's final stat line was ugly, but his beard was glorious, and that's what really matters. Game number 9, Jake Delhomme, November 9th, 2008. Most people remember Delhomme's meltdown in the 2008 playoffs versus Arizona as the end of his career, but there were warning signs before that. Just a few months earlier, in a matchup versus the shit Oakland Raiders, the best quarterback in Super Bowl 38 started off great, finding Musa Muhammad for a touchdown. The rest of the game, well, was not so good. Delhomme finished 7 of 27 with that 1 touchdown and also 4 interceptions and a 12.3 passer rating. People overlooked this because Carolina won, largely thanks to D'Angelo Williams rushing for 140 yards and a touchdown, and Carolina's defense getting to play against one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history, Andrew Walter. The end result was an ugly 17-6 Carolina win. Game number 10, Dave Wilson, November 9th, 1986. Dave who? Exactly. 22 years earlier to the day of Delhomme's win versus the Raiders, this forgotten Saints signal caller produced a shit-tacular performance in a thrilling 6-0 win over the Rams, going 9 of 20 for 134 yards and 3 interceptions for a 27.9 rating. What's interesting is the Rams were a good team, going 10-6 that year and making the playoffs, but on this day they could only muster 176 yards of offense and 4 turnovers, giving Wilson a quote-unquote win every quarterback will be jealous of. Game number 11, Bobby Hebert, November 19th, 1989. Fast forward 3 years while we stay in the land of the Bayou. Shout out to Bobby Boucher. Another Bobby Hebert, was playing quarterback for the Saints, and on this day versus the rival Falcons and their rookie superstar Deion Sanders, he threw 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions for a putrid 33.3 rating. But luckily for old Bobby, he got over 200 yards of ground support, and the Falcons, as always, failed to come through in the clutch in the fourth quarter, giving Hebert a fourth quarter comeback and a game-winning drive for his efforts. That's what greatness looks like. Game number 12, Rex Grossman. Rex is the only quarterback with the honor of appearing on this video more than once, and to make it even better, both of his games are from the same season, his infamous Jekyll and Hyde 2006, where he made the Super Bowl. The game we're focusing on came against the Vikings, and Sexy Rexy did not disappoint. He finished the win with a 1.3 passer rating, going 6 of 19 for 34 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. To make it more hilarious, the Bears still won handily, thanks to a Hester punt return touchdown, a pick 6, a safety, and a 24-yard touchdown run. Chicago's defense forced 5 turnovers themselves to cancel out Rex's incompetence. What a fascinating quarterback he was. Game number 13, Mark Rypien, December 9th, 1990. Rypien, a future Super Bowl MVP, actually had one of his best statistical starts to a career of any quarterback ever before falling off hard in 1992. But that's neither here nor there, as he was absolutely horrific in this 1990 outing game versus Chicago. He threw 5 interceptions to put his team in a 9-0 hole in the second half, but thanks to a stout defense and the Bears having no offense or good quarterback play, shocker, Rypien was able to heroically lead his team to 10 points to win. Rypien got a fourth quarter comeback and game-winning drive for his quote-unquote clutch performance, aka having a few good plays late while playing like shit all game. This is known in some circles as a Brady. Mark Rypien? More like Mark Rypien ass. Get it? Because he threw a lot of interceptions and he stunk. Moving on. Game number 14. Mark Wilson, December 8th, 1985. That's right. Zach Wilson isn't the first BYU quarterback to be drafted highly in the first round with the last name Wilson who ended up being terrible. His 80s counterpart, Mark, no relation, existed too, don't forget. On this particular day, Wilson threw for 93 yards on 28 attempts, 1 touchdown, and 4 interceptions for a 26.9 rating. Thanks in part to a stellar ground game led by 1985 NFL MVP Marcus Allen, Wilson did not do enough harm to cost his team while his defense shut down the overrated John Elway in the second half to squeak out this 17-14 overtime win. Another game-winning drive, so clutch. Game number 15, Trent Dilfer, December 17th, 2000. The Dilf is widely considered the worst quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, and that might be true, but you know what? Who cares? Do you think he cares when he looks at his ring? Do you think he cares that in this late season game versus a terrible Cardinals team, he threw 22 passes for 70 yards, took 4 sacks for 33 lost yards, and had a 41.9 passer rating? No. Baltimore's legendary defense forced 4 turnovers while giving up just 7 points on 12 drives. That was enough for the Dilf, who led his offense to 13 points on 12 drives. All that matters is that you score more points than the other team, right? Suck it, Marino. Game number 16, Doug Williams, December 16th, 1979. What a wonderful what the fuck game this was. The Buccaneers ran the ball 62 times for 224 yards, leaving their quarterback Doug Williams, the second best quarterback to ever wear number 12 for Tampa Bay after Trent Dilfer, with just 13 pass attempts, which he used to put up 51 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions for a 10.9 rating. Luckily for Doug in Tampa, Kansas City was somehow even worse offensively, and for all of his trouble, Williams received a game-winning drive as the only points of the game came in the fourth quarter on a Tampa field goal. This is easily the most impressive Tampa win over Kansas City that I can think of, and it also completes the perfect season of shit, but now it's playoff time. The worst winning performance by a quarterback in the divisional round in NFL history belongs to Dieter Brock from January 4th, 1986. Brock is an interesting story. He played just 1 season in the NFL in 1985 at age 34 after a legendary CFL career. He went 11-4 in 15 starts for the Rams and led them all the way to the NFC Championship game where they got slaughtered by the famous 85 Bears. But a week before that, Brock beat the Dallas Cowboys by simply doing next to nothing. He went 6 for 22 for 50 yards and an interception to finish with a putrid 20.6 passer rating. However, his ability to hand the ball off to Eric Dickerson was in top form, as the Hall of Fame running back ran for a still NFL playoff record 248 yards and 2 touchdowns, while the Rams defense forced 6 turnovers and shut out the Cowgirls to win 20-0. Only 2 wins away from immortality now. The worst winning performance by a quarterback in conference championship game history belongs, surprisingly, not to Tom Brady, but to David Woodley on January 23rd, 1983. Some people forget that the year before the Dolphins lucked into Marino, they made the Super Bowl. But there is a reason that despite making the Super Bowl, they still drafted Marino. It's because their incumbent starting quarterback at the time, David Woodley, fucking reeked. But in the 1982 AFC Championship game, Woodley sucked just a little less than his New York Jets counterpart, Richard Todd. Woodley went 9 of 21 for 87 yards. He threw 3 interceptions and took 4 sacks for 27 lost yards. His passer rating was 15.5, which was somehow still better than Todd's 8.8 passer rating. A Miami pick 6 in the fourth quarter, which was their 5th interception of the day, put them up 14-0 to seal the game. Woodley then played like shit in the Super Bowl loss, then was quickly replaced by Marino early the next season, and the rest is history. 1 win away from immortality now. No offense to the 2007 Patriots. And the worst winning performance by a quarterback in Super Bowl history, Ben Roethlisberger, February 5th, 2006. Who better than famous respecter of women's bodies, Ben Roethlisberger, to close out this video? Ben's awful performance in his first Super Bowl win in 2005 versus Seattle was one for the ages. The game has long been mired by allegations that the refs fucked Seattle over, but that's for a different video. Ben finished the game only 9 of 21 for 123 yards passing and 2 interceptions for a 22.6 passer rating. He did use his giant flabby body to run for for a touchdown, one that was very questionable though if he actually broke the goal line. But he was actually the second best quarterback on his own team in this game, behind Anton Randall L. and his 21-10 win. In Ben's defense, he was very distracted mentally, wanting to make sure all the females in attendance were safe at all times. The worst 19-0 team possible has finally achieved the ultimate goal. It's only fitting that a class act like Ben gets to hold up the Lombardi. Let's look at the final stats on the perfect season. In a perfect 16-0 regular season, the quarterbacks combined to complete just under 42% of their attempts for 4.1 yards per attempt. They combined for an outstanding 5 touchdowns and 51 interceptions for a sparkling 19.1 passer rating and negative 2.5 adjusted net yards per attempt. Just for reference, Ryan Leaf's career adjusted net yards per attempt is positive 2.71. Okay, moving on. This perfect team of shit outscored opponents 297 to 168 in the regular season, averaging 18.6 points per game while allowing just 10.5 points per game, which is 2000 Ravens level dominance. But true greatness is about raising your game in the playoffs, and that's exactly what this team did. In 3 playoff wins, the quarterbacks of this perfect team combined to complete 38% of their passes for 4.1 yards per attempt, but it gets better, as they combined for no touchdowns and 6 interceptions with a jaw-dropping 11.2 passer rating and negative 0.69 adjusted net yards per attempt. Nice. This hypothetical 19-0 team of champions outscored opponents 55 to 10 in 3 playoff games to cement themselves as the greatest team in NFL history. Only a truly great quarterback could win a Super Bowl with his defense giving up 3.3 points per game in the playoffs.